thank you all for coming. We've got a lot to get through today. We've got Javed here today, and he'll be talking about Modi, Kashmir, and the Hindutva, and Islamophobia beyond Europe. So really good stuff there, loads to cover and stuff. And then in the second half, we've got Syra. We'll also be talking about Marxism, and Rob will be keeping us up to date with what's happening this weekend, a big thing this weekend as well, the Summit of Resistance. And then we've got next week's talk from Amit about what's happening in Turkey. Yay, so a lot going on. So pleasure to have Javed here. So, yay.
Thank you. Right, well, normally whenever I do these meetings, I always kind of say, thanks for coming and everything, which obviously that goes without saying, but also this may be something we felt out of our depth, but I'm in Bradistan today, so this won't be out of our depth for a lot of us, to be fair. First thing I want to say is it's obvious with no doubt in mind that we're seeing the staggering and alarming rise of the far right, not just now in Europe, but also in the West in general, when you with the likes of America and the current election of Donald Trump. However, while this is a terrifying sight to witness, it is also a very massive and real fact in the world's so-called largest democracy, that being India. And when we're looking at how this threat has been shown, it's shown through none other than through Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of the Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP for short, and the current Prime Minister of India. But who is Modi exactly, and why is he and the leadership the centerpiece of Islamophobia beyond Europe and beyond the West? To know that, we first need to know Modi. As a young boy, Modi was part of an organization called the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, or the RSS for short. The RSS itself was formed during the latter years of the colonial period, and their beliefs were that of anti-minority and anti-communist rhetoric. Though not inspired by Nazism as many claim, they would later inherit many Nazi ideals around the time of Modi and other BJP members also coming to a strong rise. The RSS is one of the stronghold organizations of the Hindutva that live, eat and breathe that ideology. Many of its members even often stating that what Hitler had done to the Jews, that's what India must do for its own problems. It is within spending time within the RSS that Modi developed his communalism. The communalism being the favoring of one group or another over the rest of society. And Modi became a figurehead in that regard as began his steady rise into the political sphere, where his communalism really took shape as he favored Hindus over other minorities. And those minorities simply didn't have a chance, even though he had a duty of care towards them. The way we want that communalism can be really shown would be during the 2002 Gujarat state riot, in which 2,000 Muslims were brutalized, raped, murdered, killed, the likes of some of the most horrific crimes you can commit in such an act. Now, many in his administration claim that Modi allowed the massacres to take place, and honestly, they would be right, because when he was asked about opening relief centers for the women who were affected by these riots, he said, should we open relief camps, run child-producing centers? Now, you're probably wondering, what exactly is his meaning behind this? Why is this line of phrasing so important and so vital to what Modi does and who he is? Well, you have to look no further than early of last year, where Modi, in reference to the opposition, the Indian Congress, would state the following: and their earlier government stated that Muslims has the first right over the nation's wealth. This means they will collect the nation's wealth and distribute it to whom? To those who have more children, to the infiltrators. Should your hard-earned money be given to infiltrators? We see that through this, Modi actively engages in the othering of Muslims, labeling them as infiltrators just there to make more children outnumber the average Hindu. That should be feared just how many they are, and every good citizen of India must fear how many Muslims there are, and should be right in their fear and do all they can to make sure that they're the ones benefiting from society and not anyone else, and some sort of weird infatuation with the great replacement theory. Modi is essentially basing his idea of India and its citizenship on being Hindu. He hastened the construction of a Hindu temple over the raised site of a mosque destroyed by Hindu mobs in 1992 to appeal to the masses exactly in that communal way. The idea that Muslims will never replace them and they will have to rebuild on their desolation in order to create a proper nation for India that isn't exactly tolerant to anyone else outside that communal sphere. What he essentially wants is a theocracy, and his policies and ministers of restructuring Indian society completely disenfranchises Muslims completely, scapegoating them of all problems, and communal violence at an all-time high, to the point that whenever I look at my phone, I will most likely see Hindutva mobs storming Muslim-majority areas. I mean, just last week we had Holi. A lot of Indian people celebrating Holi in the UK, obviously, but in India there was an incident where a Muslim man was going to mosque and refused to have colour thrown on his face because it was not something he'd celebrate. And in that refusal, finding out that he was actually a Muslim going to do his prayers, was beaten to death in the streets during the celebration. He actually designed Hindu chauvinism to be consumed and grow at such an alarming rate that I don't think the peak of that chauvinism has been reached yet. But how on earth is it that Modi has managed to keep such a tight hold on power despite the vast economic struggles that many Indians face today? And that comes in several forms. Firstly, Modi's been able to whip up the perfect villain. They're whipping up anger and patriotism for the people of India, this enemy, this dark to their light, the reason for all their problems. Anyone want to guess what that problem is? It's Pakistan. But it isn't just a nation next door to them. No, Pakistan is a euphemism for Indian Muslims, used to question the loyalty of Indian Muslims, saying that they don't care about India, they only really care for their enemy. Therefore, they are the enemy, because the BJP doesn't even have a single Muslim MP within their ranks. He openly promotes development projects because, let's be real, he'll use communalism to stoke divide and rule, but Modi is hell-bent on being pretty much the capitalist that he is in the neoliberal world we live in today. Because when he talks about the development projects, he's really transferring public resources and land or loans by state banks into big businesses. 70% of India's GDP comes from agriculture, and this leads many farmers already facing an economic crisis to rely on either suicide for insurance money for their families or sending their children away abroad to work and have remittances, which obviously we see from that a lot of South Asians being exploited and slaved away to death in countries like Qatar when the World Cup came around at the Stadium and many people died. Yet despite this, and despite the fact that there was millions of farmers and workers striking the 2014 and under 2014-2019 BJP government, that being the worst in India, they still managed to get elected back in 2024. But it is a key point to make. The economic horrors that the capitalist system has produced in India had left it the perfect ground for Modi to gain votes in the 2014 election, promising to fix the welfare of the nation and protect the economy. That's where he has then this slate of anger he can very well utilize, something that was needed, but that anger towards, and it became none other than the faults of the minorities in India. After all, if you're a worker in India being hit with anti-minority sentiment, it's easy to believe that it's not the state causing your problems, it's actually the traitors within. So it's because of those people, not the ruling class. And I hate to say it, Modi is smart. He manages the anger by throwing small welfare schemes here and there, turning his voters into clients and managing them to exploit the system and masquerading with his communal hat before turning around to the very affluent and growing Indian middle class, giving them whatever policies they need. He's developed the ideas and practices to form a Hindu-only society, but that is actually most for the upper caste within India, favouring pure Brahmins and having complete disdain for those at the bottom of the caste system. So when he merges capitalism and casteism together, he realizes that those who don't fit into the caste system are simply threats to societal functionality, that being Sikhs and Muslims. And it fits perfectly with Modi's neoliberal capitalist India. After all, the upper caste Brahmins need people to do menial jobs like cleaning their toilets and picking up trash, or doing jobs they wouldn't dare sully their hands for, or for the profit they'll make off of them by exploiting them. The BJP constantly said that the caste system is necessary for social cohesion. It's the order of the Hindu way. So what happens when you don't have a population that don't fit within that system to then be easily exploited? Well, you get pogroms against Muslims. Their businesses looted and destroyed, boycotted, Muslims turned away from jobs that could fundamentally change their lives, hanged for eating meat, the list goes on. He legitimizes violence against anyone non-Hindu. He wears Hinduism on his sleeve and stokes tensions with communal statements to promise people that he will grant them the nation they want, that he wants. And God forbid you're a critic. Critics were some of the most annihilated under the BJP government. They were often called the Indian Mujahideen, because if you're a critic, good luck surviving. Because you'd have to survive against a horde of Hindutva fanatics storming you like it's World War Z, ready to kill you on sight. And this was actually something that happened, because if you were to speak out against BJP policies like the banning of beef or the criminalization of interreligious marriage, you would be sentenced to death by the Hindutva public. Rioters, historians, scholars are some of the many that have been killed because of this. And it was even worse during COVID, because the BJP constantly blamed Muslims for the spread of COVID. And despite Muslims only being 30% of the despite Muslims only being 14% of the population, the BJP-led health ministry said that they caused 30% of cases, calling it corona terrorism or the Muslim virus. Muslim gatherings were criminalized while Hindu ones were not. Muslims even now live on 32 rupees a day, which is 30 pence. They're the poorest minority group in India. 40% of villages with a large Muslim population don't even have medical facilities, and these structural inequalities have only gotten worse underneath Modi, who has created one of the most polarized societies of today. Ministers at rallies even saying that traitors need to be shot and killed, Goli Maro, Sare Goli Maro, shoot them all dead. School textbooks being rewritten to completely rid India of its Muslim history. Archaeological surveys even saying that Muslim sites, they don't exist. Even going so far to the point where they'll say that the Taj Mahal was not built by a Muslim king, but a Hindu emperor thousands of years before the Mughals ever even existed. And even rewriting Muslims as zealots or infiltrators and invaders. Ministers even saying that if one Hindu man is killed by a Muslim man, they should kill 100 Muslim men as retribution. But none of these things can compare to the way he has used Kashmir to invoke and inflame Hindu nationalism. For those who don't know, Kashmir is a region largely occupied and split between India and Pakistan. Both sides constantly dispute and argue just who really owns all of Kashmir. Pakistan occupies it in the manner of, well, back in the 70s, they took a bunch of land and built a giant dam on it near where I live. That land used to be my granddad's land. Now it's gone because they put a dam over it, and they made my granddad forge his signature on the papers. So, because he can't read or write, and therefore he lost that land and had to move to my mother's village. But the occupation of Kashmir when it comes to India is one of the most disgusting, brutal occupations ever witnessed, and they've had them in occupation for decades, long preceding the current BJP government, because even the Indian Congress is at fault for this as well. Kashmir itself being a Muslim majority land, 500,000 Indian troops currently sit within Kashmir to enforce its occupation. The occupation of Kashmir has had a long history of forced abductions, internment camps, systematic torture and destruction of livelihood, repression of uprising, the resistance, and the list goes on. I mean, in 2016, mass protests took place, where in response, Indian forces opened fire with non-lethal pellets, blinding hundreds, if not thousands of Kashmiris permanently, just to quell them. That lasted for 4 months, in which 17,000 adults and children were injured and 5,000 were arrested, and the population spent that entire summer in a curfew. Though they are under occupation, it was under Article 370 that Kashmir had its own special regional autonomy with limited self-determination for them to have. Non-Kashmiris were not allowed to own business or own land in Kashmir, which for many aggravated many on the far right in India, and it kind of makes sense why they'd be so pissed off in a way, because Kashmir is this beautiful, rich land of agricultural valleys, tall mountains and crystal lakes as far as the eyes can see. But that would be swiftly destroyed in 2019 once the article got revoked, and take away all legal autonomy in Kashmir. What would happen next would be an influx of Hindu migrants migrating into Kashmir, encouraging to go on pilgrimages and buy land and industrialize the place, make business, displace the population. Gaining and colonizing steadily upon it, which brings us to no surprise that Kashmir, though often overlooked, is called the South Asian Palestine. And it sounds outlandish when you first hear it, but when you come to realize that the weapons and technology that they use in Kashmir come from one place and one place only, Israel. Israel and India have had a long-standing relationship for more than a decade now, and Gaza will often get called a laboratory for what will happen in Kashmir. Weapons will go into Kashmir, surveillance technology will go into Kashmir. In fact, the Indian military who occupies Kashmir right now are taught by the IDF in counter-terror operations they use in the West Bank and Gaza. I mean, even since 2019, there's been like a media and internet blackout, so it seems kind of hard to say what the situation is on the ground, because there are a plethora of resistance groups fight back, including the fractured Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, which, fun fact, was formed in Birmingham in the 1970s, which incorporated both sides of Kashmir in the fight. Separatist and nationalist freedom movement, kind of similar to the IRA in a way. Turns out my family was all part of it, I never knew that. But how's that tied into Modi's insane Islamophobia and his Hindu chauvinism? It's kind of simple. Revoking the Kashmiris' right as a population and as a people allows them to absorb the land into the rest of India. This beautiful, rich land that Hindus could not get a chance to touch is now the crown of India, as what Modi has been consistently calling it. It's no longer Kashmir, but merely a part of India up for grabs. And if you think from what I've talked about on the violence of mainland India is bad, it's probably 1,000 times more worse in Kashmir itself. But that brings us to the most important part of this talk. India's continued brutality, bigotry, far-right chauvinism could have not gone on as long as it has and in the way it has had it not been for those who blindly support Modi and perpetuate his policies on the ground against anyone who's not pro-him and against minorities. And of course I'm talking about the Hindutva. Many of us would have heard about the Hindutva during the riots in Leicester back in 2022, where we saw hundreds of young Indian men storming Muslim majority streets, beating up anyone who was Muslim or looked remotely Muslim. Sikhs were also the brunt of this. Anyone take a wild guess why they rioted? I find it hilarious. It's because they lost to Pakistan in the World Cup in cricket, and so they started rioting. I watched that match. It was actually a really good one. But for that to be the cause of why they started rioting was insane. I mean, they were going around chanting chauvinist slogans, particularly slogans associated with Sangh Parivar, the organization, the Brotherhood of Organizations. The RSS, as I mentioned earlier, are actually a part of Sangh Parivar. It is a network of far-right Hindu groups, which include ones like the Bajrang Dal, who in 1992 killed a Christian missionary and his 2 children because they were simply Christian. The RSS is one of the core groups within the Hindutva sphere, had a great influence on Sangh Parivar's history. I mean, the entirety of those guys are like far-right, authoritarian, xenophobic in nature, and this coupled with the othering of Indian Muslims and using Pakistan to label them as enemies makes them a horrifying movement to come up against. In fact, on many occasions, the RSS have even stated that the far-right in India, no, the far-right in Europe, I mean, and here should be emulating their Indian model. They grew around the same time as the rise of fascism in Europe in the early 1920s, but not born from the same conditions. Seeing how horrifying we are back in India, it's kind of crazy to see that they want to enact the same level of violence here. But Hindutva itself is a political theory. While mainly we'll see the use of parades, symbols, and ultra-loyalty to terrorize minorities, the reality is that Hindutva as a theory argues that Hinduism is the only expression of Indianness. To be Indian is to be Hindu. Anything aside from that is foreign, and the object of Hindutva is to simply erase that, including the socialist left and the legacies of Nehru and Gandhi. The ideology sprung up in response to divide and rule. In fact, if I want to put it better, I can read out here a book called We Our Nationhood Defined, one of the core texts of the Hindutva groups, which it states, Hindus came into the land from nowhere but are indigenous sons of the soil from everywhere. The foreign races in Hindustan must either adopt Hindu culture and language and must entertain no ideas but the glorification of the Hindu race and culture, or may stay in the country wholly subordinated to be Hindu, wholly subordinated to the Hindu nation, deserving no privileges, far less any preferential treatment, and not even citizens' rights. They also have a lot of political influence, majority of them made of petty bourgeoisie and middle-class Hindus. Because of that, many BJP states have passed legislation banning the slaughter of cows, leading to genuinely cow-protecting militias who would lynch any Muslim accused of smuggling cows or eating beef. When anti-interreligious marriage laws were placed, they would kidnap Muslim husbands, accusing them of stealing young Hindu women. This mass strengthening of an Islamophobic campaign led to a complete decomposition and smashing of the left. The Communist Party of India, brackets, Marxist, because of the fact that they've been relying so much on electoralism to gain some sort of link with the working class, they've been utterly destroyed. In 2014 election, they got down to, they only had 3 seats left, losing the state of Bengal, one of their strongholds, and then in the 2024 election, they now have 2 seats. And because of this, it's the BJP's current electoral hegemony, and well, not in current because they had to form a very slight coalition government now, but in that moment, it was the desire to make India portrayed as globally powerful on the world stage, and that was a priority by any means necessary. The only way to go forward is pretend that there is no class conflict, and the only way to truly serve under the caste system, which only aids in the aspirations of the expanding Indian capitalist class. Sangh Parivar even has a student wing with only over 3 million members who constantly will smash other left-wing student groups every chance they get, essentially indoctrinating the youth with far-right political theory and to use them as cadre in the future. And you're gonna love this part. Tommy Robinson himself even allies a lot with the Sangh Parivar. and Hindutva groups in order to gain legitimacy to claims that he is actually not racist, he's actually fighting Islamism, letting soft racists around him feel confident while Hindutva just kind of really get excited to rampage around. He's even being keynote speaker in India at Hindutva gatherings, being flown out to go speak there. Matter of fact, in the 2024 election, when the BJP won, albeit slightly, he tweeted at Modi and said, "Congratulations on staving off communism and Islamism." Now, what we can gather from all this, and what it is that we wish to learn, is okay, I need to slow down here. What can we gather from all this, and what is it we wish to learn and do after knowing what the situation is like in India for Muslims? It is this: the left in India are too weak to form any opposition against the state. Socialism for them is like a distant dream, and aspirations of class consciousness don't even come close to them. India's fusing of capitalist ideals in the caste system creates an iron layer against oppositional ideals and beliefs. The use of Hindu nationalism affirms the beliefs in the caste system which the bourgeoisie will utilize to benefit and profit themselves above all others as they exploit the Indian working class to dismantle anything that can be perceived as a threat to India, because to be anti-BJP is to be anti-capitalist, and to be that, you're anti-Hindu, and to be that, you might as well be called Pakistani. And Muslims are at the forefront of being labelled that enemy. But they are an enemy of Hindu India. As long as there are divisions between the Hindus and Muslims, the idea of class consciousness and collective mass movement against the state is a pipe dream, and that is exactly what the ruling class and upper caste of India want as they push more divisive policies against minorities and make the Hindutva population feel like they're truly defending their nation. Of course, the ruling class within the BJP subscribe to the same ideology as the ones they exploit, but as long as they benefit more from it, they'll continue to push it out further and further. But the BJP hasn't even answered any of the questions fundamentally, economically plaguing India. It's only a question of how long they can keep their game up, and if they can really reach an end goal of establishing a Hindu nation, if that will even work, if they have no enemies to scapegoat anymore. I mean, the legacy of all this comes from Britain's arbitrarily drawn borders and divide and rule strategies that have led to the brutal occupation of Kashmir. You know, any bit of funding we give to Israel will go to Kashmir anyways, as a result of India's and Israel's ongoing connection. And then the far right of India come here and make strong links with the hardcore fascists in Britain. The answer doesn't lie in giving a solution to India, though there is work to be done here in this country as that influx of Hindu ideology is growing and integrating with the likes of Tommy Robinson. So the answer kind of comes in several responses. Obviously, the situation in India cannot be granted the solutions by going there and giving them the politics. The left needs to be obviously rebuilt instead of relying on small policy concessions and electoralism. There needs to be a mass movement like how we saw with the farmers and workers' strikes that took India by storm. And, a fight for a secular and democratic society without the BJP, RSS or Sangh Parivar having a hand in shaping Indian politics. Ideologies like that to be opposed and countered for the fight for Kashmir's exercise the right of independence. Personally, for me, I wouldn't want to be either under Pakistan or India, because both are actually just kicking, and forgive my language, the shit out of us. And also there needs to be a widespread fight against the economic struggles pushed by Hindu chauvinism with its reliance on the caste system to pacify opposition to exploitation. As stated in Lenin's What Is to Be Done, every picture of capitalist exploitation, every event needs to be taken, set forth democratic demands and the convictions of the people. It is when we do that even the most backward worker will understand or will feel that the students, religious sects, peasants and authors are being abused and outraged by the same dark forces that are oppressing and crushing him at every step. And that is solely down to the Indian working class. Our work here, however, is within our anti-racist movement. With the threat of Islamophobia beyond Europe making its way here, the links with the far right and the links with the far right of India making here as well, and the call for a more hardcore and militant model of the far right, it is now more paramount than ever that we relate to the Pakistanis, the Kashmiris, the Indians on these matters. The legacy of these systemic issues and long-standing brutality is a result of colonial violence and dispossession, the legacy of divide and rule. The inflammation of seeing these differences in one another. We need to relate to the diaspora here on these real issues, because the far right here will gain more confidence the stronger those international links grow, and we are seeing that anyways with the likes of Trump and Musk. Communicate on a level with South Asians here on these issues back home to push in the fight against racism, because I'm going to say right now, remittances aren't the only thing we can send back. It is a confidence, a fight against the far right. We will lead an anti-racist movement led by black and brown people, and when we relate to issues on racism and the far right to those suffering under it in Pakistan, India, Kashmir, it shows a wider and broader layer of people, and that's the takeaway from this all. To understand more of Islamophobia abroad and how horrifying it is and how it's making its way here, to initiate a fight against Islamophobia with a broader understanding of its operations globally, and annihilate its carriers with the same people who can understand what a far right Islamophobic fascist government, or not even fascist, but that's a contentious thing, we can get to later, what a far Islamophobic government actually looks like and feels like, something we will not allow to brew here. And so until then, obviously, it's always a free Kashmir and fight against the far right, because whenever we see the far right, what we do, we smash them back down, we put them in the dirt. And that goes for any of the far right, anywhere, globally, and especially beyond Europe. Thank you.